Good morning and good noon. I think at some parts of the East Coast here. My name is Manoj Shamrani, founder and CEO of Sales Intel, and I'm excited to be here with an amazing panelist on a topic that is near and dear to every leader on the go-to-market team, which is dirty data, right? Your CRM, your marketing, your ICP, everything, has data. And if that data is not clean, complete, up to date, it not only causes the pipeline issue, but it causes the revenue missed numbers. And at the bigger scale, it causes the valuation of the business to go down, right? So with me, I have amazing panelists. So why don't we go around the panel here? Start with Danielle. Give us your intro. Danielle, tell the audience about yourself, your role, and your business.
Yes, Danielle Kaitzer. I'm the VP of Revenue Operations at a company called BetterWorks. I've been in the RevOps space since it was a lowly sales ops and moved into more marketing ops, CS ops, and now revenue ops for the last 15 plus years. And BetterWorks is a performance management software company. So it's everything from structured management reviews, feedback programs, all tied into your company's goals and OKRs as well. So helping make work better.
Awesome, Danielle. Thanks for joining us. Reed.
So Reed Beerley, I've been in revenue or sales operations for about 13 years. And before that was in supply chain operations, so more the back end side. But currently at a cybersecurity company called OpSWAT, and we do critical infrastructure protection for government and utilities, energy, manufacturing, those kinds of things. And obviously critical infrastructure data quality is vitally important for that industry and for our customers. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Reed. Vivek?
Sure. I'm Vivek Vishal, currently working at Honeywell, leading the revenue operations for one of the businesses within Honeywell. Prior to that, I spent a decade with Dell Technologies in Texas, also leading revenue operations for the North America market. And certainly to Reed's point, I have gone through M&A between Dell and EMC, and I'm going through a divestiture from Honeywell, and I have seen how data plays a much bigger role in the revenue growth, but also in the valuation market.
Yeah, I look forward to unpack that from your angle here on this webinar, Vivek. Thank you for joining us, Naveen.
Thanks, Manoj. Navin Prasad, Vice President RevOps here at 1Password. I've been in ops for 20 plus years, in SaaS RevOps for the last 10. Really passionate on the subject, so thanks for having me. 1Password, think about it as we do exactly what we say. We really make it simple for both people and for companies to protect the things that are secret. We do that at scale. We're a Canadian company, and I'm looking forward to the conversation here.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. To get right into it, dirty data, you talk to CRO, you talk to VP of Sales, VP of Marketing, VP of RevOps. Everybody is irritated with data that's not being clean, complete, or up to date in their go-to-market systems. And the topic of this webinar is it not only costs you the pipeline, but the revenue, and as Vivek will unpack, the valuation of your business as you get ready to exit. The fundamental question here is, how does this dirty data get into the system? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to export bad data in my CRM system. So I would love to start from there. Is it the dirty data problem, or is it more of a process issue? So Daniel, do you want to kick us off with that? Or Reed, would you like to take that question, because
yeah,
you're
sure.
so close to this?
Yeah, so I think, when we think about dirty data, obviously, I think it varies based on where you are in the business, right? Your perspective on what's clean or dirty can be different. And so I think one important part is to make sure we have common definitions around, for that object, whether it's in Salesforce or maybe Marketo or HubSpot or whatever system it's in. Are we clear on whether or not that data is complete? Is it timely, right? When we think about data, the quality of it can be based on the timeliness. Does it need to be updated real time, once a day, once a week? And then is it accurate, right? Do we know what accurate is? And then even going further, when we think about data quality, is it a mandatory field? Is it something that must be populated 100% of the time? Is it conditional? So, hey, if it's going into Brazil, it needs to have a certain Brazil tax ID number that's unique for Brazil. Or is it optional where, hey, if we can get something like if we can get an accurate annual revenue on that company that we're trying to sell to, which sometimes may be easier, sometimes they're a cloaked startup that doesn't have revenue yet. And so really getting clear on those definitions, I think, is key for data up front to know whether or not it's clean, it's semi-clean, or is it dirty. And then I think it comes into the process side. And when you're running revenue operations, you have so many different processes. You have processes around sales compensation. That's probably one of the processes that is mandatory. It must be as clean as possible, because when sales compensation data isn't clean, boy, do we hear about it in revenue operations. And so then there's other fields like annual revenue, like I talked about, where, hey, we're going to make our best effort to get that from, one of the big firmographic providers. But, is it 100% accurate? Well, every quarter it changes. So how can it always be accurate? Right. So we'll do our best in revenue operations to make sure that it's as updated as possible. But I think thinking about your business processes and categorizing them into ones that must be absolutely pristine, like sales compensation, because it impacts people's, wallets. And then there's other processes where you can have, good enough data, and then there's going to be some processes that you just haven't gotten to yet. It's a lower priority, and so they may be more manual, they haven't been systematized, and so there'll be challenges. So I think just thinking about them and segmenting them is key.
It's great. Couldn't agree more with you. Contact data, although, day one you put it, somebody's contact information is accurate. It's not dirty. But if this person changes the job, it's no longer, accurate data. Couldn't agree more. Naveen, what's your thought on this?
I think people need to realize that data is a shared asset, but if everyone owns it, that means no one owns it. That's a huge problem that I've seen in companies that I've been. You think about it, the importance of data is to drive insight into your business. That insight should inform strategy. If you have bad data, you have poor insight, and you may have a bad strategy. So those things are really, really connected deeply. From my standpoint, it's really got to be around who owns it, and what is your process to make sure, as Reed mentioned, that you're collecting it in a way that is structured and sort of builds for the future and scalability of your business. If you have an owner that's now and you have a plan that only speaks to the here and now, you're already doing yourself a disservice around how you need to plan and strategize and collect insight for the growth of your business. No one ever wants to be the business that is right now. They aspire to be the business they want to grow into. So your plan for data must also align to those things as well.
That makes sense. Naveen, who owns the data? In your organization and in your point of view, who should own the data?
This is a spicy topic. I think in my world, or at 1Password, the sales data is owned by RevOps, right? If it lives in the CRM, we are the custodians. We are responsible for ensuring that it is accurate, it is enriched, and it tells the story that feeds the narrative that drives our business. But we are a business that has a B2C business. We have an e-commerce business. So there's a larger data story at play that maybe we don't directly own, but we have an opportunity to shape a narrative around how that data is structured. It will be different in every business, but a lot of high growth companies really only have a small sales team. They only have a CRM that is just beginning and growing. And in those instances, they must have a RevOps function. If they don't, they're just setting themselves up for someone's future RevOps pain to come in and solve because they didn't have a strategy, they didn't have an owner, and it's a bit of a Wild West.
Daniel?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I typically come into growth stage companies that has been the case. And it is spending, the first quarter you're getting in there kind of learning and doing an audit on what do we have? Why do we have this? Having a data dictionary, it's always the last thing you really want to spend time doing at the point in time. But something as you grow, right? So I found out this week, I'm about 3 months into my company. We have a completely other ARR field I should have been looking at the opportunity, right? So then you have your head of RevOps pulling reports, being brand new, coming in, and I might be looking at an amount differentiator when I'm trying to pull target reports for our next fiscal year planning, right? So something where you have finance in there, you had RevOps in there, you had sales management in there, all giving their own 2 cents on what ARR we should look at. So really coming together and getting, okay, now we have a card with a specific definition for the 5 different types of ARR we might have and when you actually use each of them. So having that data dictionary, always kind of a pain in the butt to sit down and put together, but really invaluable as your company grows. You're going to have, again, turnover of executives coming through, sales reps coming through. There's always new people coming in and out, and that helps set them up for success. But the other thing, in talking about, we've talked a lot about enrichment and whatnot, but getting that enrichment schedule in place early on. So to that point of literally having, you might have an operating calendar that you're helping with different types of forecasting meetings and whatnot. You should also have an operating calendar for your enrichment. So what types of things you need to enrich real time, weekly, maybe monthly, quarterly. I'll talk a little bit about that, maybe a little bit further on of where some of those fit in, but at a B2B SaaS is what I've been in, and it's always RevOps owns the data quality. The challenge there is you need tight partnerships cross-functionally though, because guess what? We don't actually own the accountability of the reps entering some of those fields or marketing, setting up certain campaigns a certain way all the time, right? We can do so much to bring someone to water, but getting them to actually swim and make it to the other side, right? That's where we need the partnership with the leaders on those teams, and we need their buy-in and understanding that here's why we're doing it this way, here's the outcomes we're going to drive. And also just when all those partners are coming to you asking for this field and the next, into your CRM or your MAP program, really questioning that leader and saying, hey, love this. What are we trying to drive? What business questions are we trying to answer? What type of reporting are we looking to get out of adding this piece of data? Is this a piece of data we can actually automate? Because we know every time you add a manual entry step, you're introducing a very high risk caliber of dirty data, right? Anytime you ask someone to manually enter something, whether they are the most pristine operational person, you have fat fingering, you have laziness, you have a million things going on and dropping the ball and getting that data point entered. So especially in a day and age of AI integrated into almost everything these days, right? Thinking through like, what can we automate for that as well? And I really liked what Navin said about thinking ahead, because that's something my team, right? We might not be ready for this data point in our reporting back to leadership right now. But if we start tracking it today, when leadership's ready and asking for it in 6 months, we're not 6 months behind. We have 6 months of data. We can actually show them and say, hey, that's a great question. Here's how we've been looking at it, right? So from an operational perspective, you're also a step ahead in the game if you are thinking forward of how might we want to use this metric as we grow.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you, Daniel. Vivek, in your world where you have multiple companies under your umbrella, how do you manage the world?
I think, and both Navin and Daniel kind of laid out a lot of examples and who is the custodian, where the data. I think the ownership lies on everyone. Yes, we are the custodian, but let me take an example. Think about a sales rep or a seller who is trying to create an account. And it's as simple as creating an account for a customer that they're working a deal with. And I'm going to take a customer, say Pepsi, right? I'm a seller. I'm going to create an account. I don't know if Pepsi is already a customer in my CRM or not. I don't know if it's the same customer, even if the name sounds fine. You know what? Just to get things quick, I will create an account and book the deal. Now, while I did that, and when I did that, I just created a duplicate account, maybe not. I don't know. And that's where the data starts becoming dirty, because now you have a parent and child, or you may have a parent and child where the two customers are the same customers, but now it's going to create an issue in managing your pipeline, in incentive compensation. So while the RevOps is the custodian, how do I go back and train my sales rep? How do I use a technology that tells the sales rep, hey, you know what? This might be a child to this parent based on the DUNS number that you just input. How do I use my technology? How do you use my training to prevent the data becoming dirty upfront versus fix it later. I know the very topic of our webinar. That's a simple example of how the data starts becoming dirtier and creepier. And if you fix it upfront, then you reap the benefits later.
Yeah. So it's a good transition to, start right or fix it later, right? Obviously, if you're starting a new company, CRM, marketing, data is the last thing on your mind. Product market fit and getting to the first dollar in the first 10,000, 100,000 million revenue is top of mind for you. So invariably, companies find themselves when they are $3, $4, $5 million in revenue, they find that, look, I have this dirty data problem. Naveen, what are some of the tangible nuggets that you would share, or the practical ideas that you would share, tips that you would share with the audience here to say, okay, you know what? It's never too late, but start now, and here's how you should start.
I'd say, well, just the panel here and probably the RevOps folks attending this call, we all have jobs because companies make those decisions. It is that, how do you thread that needle with respect to, do I solve it now? Or do I just push that off for a rainy day and pay more later? And I think a lot of companies make that decision. And it not only is a cost decision, it not only eats the timing of where you might be on your growth journey as a business, but it also then, you're sacrificing a bit of your future by not better understanding how you could have planned to solve for that, what your product market fit might be. Maybe you needed to knock down a specific industry, but you didn't have the data and weren't collecting it and weren't trending it to know that at the time where you need to make that biggest growth curve, because you took all that money and you now need to grow. So there are a lot of things you forsake by not solving it up front. I talked earlier about there needs to be accountability, or there needs to be ownership. There also needs to be the necessary process, guardrails. Danielle mentioned enablement and definitions, and then monitoring and cleansing. It's never going to be perfect. You need to accept that. Perfection is going to always be the enemy of pace, and data alone is not what you are trying to do. It is a means to another end, whether that end be making your sales teams more efficient, whether it means to better understand the insights so you can develop strong strategy, or whether it is just to be able to pay your reps properly and accurately. But data itself is never the end goal, and no RevOps team should be centered around that mantra. Other things I would say is understand your process. I know there are a lot of tools in the space that are actually driving enrichment and quality and et cetera, but take a step back and think about what it is you want to do. Then think about the vendors that are in that space that can best partner with you to make that happen. Too often I've seen companies, buy a bunch of tech and then realize I don't know how it'll all work together, or I need to orchestrate it, or there's some overlap. Making the wrong decisions on, without process can create even more pain for you in the near term if you don't think about it properly. The last one I would say really here is around your foundation, what you're trying to build for the future. If you were to think about it in this analogy, if you were building a house, you probably wouldn't build it on a cliff. And I think too many people and too many businesses think that way and make those kinds of decisions, and only to have, erosion and crumbling happen in the future. Find a strong foundation, because not only will that serve you in the here and now, not only will that save you money in the future, but it'll also give you the right level of insight and the time, right? Time is the enemy of all businesses, right? Every business needs to grow within a certain time. And if you can do the things that can eliminate, that sort of variable from the equation of success, you'll be in a good spot.
Thank you, Naveen. Danielle.
Yeah, I think, I had a conversation with our head of sales the other day of just some of the projects we're picking up in this first quarter for ourselves. And, he's like, I just would have thought that we'd have this tracking in place already, right? So there's those types of things where, to Navin's point, if we want to grow at a certain rate, we need to be building pipeline at a certain higher rate, right? We need good conversion rates around that. And you need the data to help you build those benchmarks and milestones into what that planning and what KPIs you're putting in front of your SDRs and AE teams, what KPIs you're feeding back to your marketing team to make sure you have enough demand coming through so that you can actually have those proper conversations and build that proper pipeline. But if those are things you rush past in the early stages, you're gonna be having to waste time and probably several quarters worth of pipeline building to take a step back and recreate that foundation. The other thing that adds to that is you end up adding a lot of that tech debt, right? So if you don't have the strong strategy of where you want to be growing, you're going to be adding data points, processes ad hoc as you think you need them. And then when you actually come back and try to reevaluate that strategy, now you're going back and untangling a very prickly web of multiple systems that you've probably tacked on as you've grown and trying to figure out which system's updating this data point. So really trying to think from the strategy before the action. Even if you come into a tech debt ridden or broken data organization, don't just try to sit there and point solve for the data gaps you're seeing when you're doing your discovery. Take that time to sit back and think about, what do we want to be doing differently? And what are the right dependencies to start with? So thinking through like, okay, we can't jump ahead to fix our conversion rate if we don't really understand what our demand to meeting to pipeline build looks like, right? So we need to be looking at that and making sure we have the right tracking and the right processes and we have the right teams bought into those before we can even jump to what's happening at stage 4 or 5 close. So just really taking, as tough as it is, and it is tough to sell up to leadership, because obviously if you are hired in to fix some of these situations, you're probably hired in thinking you're the silver bullet that's just going to fix this in the next quarter, and all of a sudden all their numbers are going to look great. So there is that upwards coaching and really bring them along, showing them the gaps, right? I was able to show a pretty obvious funnel report to help leadership team understand why I'm prioritizing a completely other process than they want me focused on this quarter, because it will set us up to confidently move quickly with the second process, right? So just thinking through like, what data stories can you be telling with this broken or dirty data that helps elevate your prioritization recommendation there. But it is worth time sitting and thinking through strategy and outcomes before doing any type of execution on that stuff.
Makes sense. And put those blueprints in front of the entire GTM teams.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, bring them along with you. Don't just
bring them along with you, right?
Don't create the silo of just fixing it and going on, or else it's just going to come back to square one. Yes.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. Vivek.
Sure, Manoj. I think you said it right? It's never too late, right? I cannot go back in the history and start fixing and putting the guardrails when the company started, but at least I can do the same thing when I'm starting a process, right? I'll give you a live example, a recent example that I had with one of our customers. We lost a deal because one of our new products, which was introduced, wasn't listed correctly for us to sell. And the seller came back and said, hey, I couldn't sell that, and I lost a multi-$100,000 deal because I don't have the right specifications of the boxes in which the product is going to ship, not the product itself, but the box size, because I need that so that the customer can figure out how many boxes can they fit in the truck for shipments. Now, that's an example where the right product data did not go into our SAP, did not flow into our Salesforce, and the seller could not use that data to tell the customer how many boxes can they fit in the truck or not. And this is, again, start of a process where I'm saying every new product which is introduced must have these things on a checklist. That's my guardrail, the checklist. Is it being checked really well? We have a lot of gaps where if I go to my website, I see a product image missing. I see a UPC number missing. Those are preventing us from building pipeline, from selling, and actually losing revenue. So honestly speaking, the ownership lies everywhere. But to your point, it's never too late. Put the guardrails, pick a process, put the guardrails, fix one thing at a time. And as kind of we keep moving, you're going to see your data quality is improving every day.
This is great. Just take small wins at a time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Reed, bring us home.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I think, we've talked about sales compensation as one of those data areas that you've got to make sure is very clean. And I think the team also highlighted another key area, which is CPQ, right? Your product configurations, your price books, your quoting, and then all of that flows into contracts and renewals and invoicing. That foundation really around your CPQ of, product configs, pricing, and quoting, I think is one of those areas you absolutely positively must have as clean as possible as you can get. And I think just like what the other panelists were speaking about, you can occasionally have configuration issues come in that cause problems, right? But being on top of that and having a really solid foundation there sets you up in so many other areas. Now, you probably wouldn't try to get absolutely positive, pristine data in intent, right?
Yeah.
Intent is one of those areas where it's, look at, I can
But
already
by
see
definition,
some
it's
of the
probabilistic.
panelists' eyes are rolling. They're like, oh, Reed, you had to go to intent and dirty data? Like, boy, that's a whole webinar on its own. But I think there are those other areas where you're trying to get, the data as good as you can get it to be, but there's some like your configuration, pricing, quoting, and contracts. Everyone has to be perfect. Like when that is wrong, it drives customers crazy. It's going to cause problems with your ARR reporting. It's going to cause issues potentially with the board of directors and even investors if they're large enough deals. Like you absolutely have to make sure that data is just neat and tidy.
Maybe, on the intent side, we tell our customers, many times customers will look at the intent data and they think this is a MQL or SQL. We tell them, on a good day, this is very directional, right? But by its very definition, all intent is probabilistic.
Yeah.
So we don't put that data as a dirty data, the data bucket. So, we all understand the importance of accurate data, and we also just unpack the cost of dirty data. One of the things that we do when we go to our customers, when we are a pipeline generation platform, you can't build a pipeline without having a very strong foundation of good quality data. But the very next step that we help our customers is to help them figure out their ideal customer profile, right? I would love to unpack that whole topic of, on a strong foundation of your data, what's the importance of ICP in an organization for the go-to-market team, and what are some of the data elements that you use in your business to define these ICP? So Daniel, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, this is a exciting and very relevant topic right now. We're doing some pretty cool stuff to get to our ICP and understand the fit score, but I'll take it back a little bit to the foundational side of that. It ties into those enrichment understandings. Do you have the right and relevant data on the accounts that you're working with in your system? Are you able to back your closed won information, even your churned and closed loss, to understand what might not be as quality, back into understanding? Most people, I think, really approach ICP from a firmographic standpoint, looking at company size, geolocation, industry they might be in, and that gives you a good beginning understanding. But I think some of the cool stuff you can start to get into with that ICP and back into actual buying moments. Because if we think about today, what we're trying to do on the RevOps side is help bring our teams an understanding of segmentation and focus. So we're being the most effective with the money we're putting into everything from marketing campaigns to SDR outbound strategies to how we're closing those with our AEs, right? And ICP is your linchpin of focus, really, when it comes down to bringing the cross-functional alignment across that funnel. So we have our demand gen teams focused on the right and same set of segments that we have our outbound strategy focused around, and we know that our AEs are more effective at closing. And the more interesting things I think you can be doing with ICP today, and we're starting to do it at BetterWorks, is using a lot of the AI tools out there. I know there's some probably hot takes about putting Clay out there, but just something we're doing really successfully right now. We had 98,000 accounts in our system when I started at BetterWorks. And there was no clear way to segment. We do performance management. There's not like a clean industry cut. There's not a clean geo cut, right? Everyone needs goals, one-on-ones in a certain subset of size of company. That was about all we could really segment on, was like, we know these sizes of companies typically need these types of programs. So we are using Clay to actually look at the firmographic to get, a clean subset of that 98,000. And then taking what we're calling non-traditional compelling events. So we're looking at about 15 to 20 different points. Sorry, my dog is I don't know if Zoom's filtering that out. Hopefully it is. But 15 to 20 data points that Clay is now consolidating in for us that look at breaking down 10K reports, looking at M&A activity, looking at company strategies, looking at revenue per employee, employee size, alternatives to our enrichment. We're then taking those 15 to 20 data points that Clay is consolidating into Snowflake's Claude AI and shooting out a ICP fit score. So we can say, okay, of this 20,000 subset that we know is firmographically an ICP for us, actually, these 10,000 are what we should be putting into territory planning and really be focusing our demand gen SDR efforts around, because they hit an ICP fit score that's not just firmographic, but also there's compelling events happening that tell us that this is likely a customer that's either entering or in a buying process for a performance software like ours. So really trying to take all the data points and take the thought out of it for our team. So RevOps is sitting there and putting together a really succinct summary of why we think these are a good fit, and then also showing the stoplight of the score that makes it up. And we'll be taking those themes into putting demand gen together, and also SDR strategy and outbound for how they approach those. So yeah, I think that's the evolution that I'm seeing happening with ICP. We're not the first. We took this, concept from, I think Census did a whole webinar on it. So you're seeing a lot more of being able to using AI to take a lot of the typically disparate data sources and organize it in and making, bringing your larger ICP down to really a attainable one.
Makes sense. That's great. Reid, what's your take on ICP?
Well, I mean, it's critically important to get clear on that, right? It helps the sales team, it helps the marketing teams. I mean, it just and it makes you more efficient. I think just like Danielle had highlighted, it's really tricky because you can take, buying groups, and although they look one way at a company level, when you get down into those details, you really have to look at deeper elements. And I think, I fortunately inherited a CRM with less than 96 or 98,000. So it was a little bit of easier at about 20,000, but it's still, unless you've got a 200-person sales team, really getting clear on where you want to focus is critical. And I do think, verticals are good areas to start, and geographies are definitely good areas to start. But you obviously have to go much deeper, and trying to really find compelling events that are going to drive buying decisions. Fortunately, we're a cybersecurity company, so one of the best compelling events is when there's a public announcement that someone's been breached. That generally means that the board of directors is going to be approving a whole lot of cybersecurity spend. So some industries, I think, have advantages with public things that do come out, which drive incremental demand. But I think absolutely. And the great thing is, I also think there's a number of good software companies, I'm not going to mention any specifically, but that have come out recently that are really focused on this topic of target accounts, ICP, and even getting down deeper than that, down to the persona level. How can you look at your customers who are really the ones that were on the buying team? Who was your champion, right? Who was the technical advocate that was on the team? Who actually was the approver or decision maker, right? Who was the influencer? Like if your CRM, if you're getting down to that level of your reps tagging who was on that buying journey, and you can do it enough times on enough accounts, you can then really start to build, not just at the ICP level, but really down to the persona levels on the buying teams that are really the ones you want to get to. And we've been doing some work in that area, and it really is immensely helpful to be able to flag those job titles and really like who is making those decisions on the team and who really are the champions, because they just get you to a deeper level of understanding in your accounts.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. No, ICP, when our customers ask us, we have an AI-based tool that helps them figure out the ICP. So it's a combination of your accounts and then the buying centers, right, that go hand in hand. Naveen, in your case, you have a product that anybody can use, right? Everybody needs one password, right? Whether it's a prosumer or the business. How do you define ICPs?
We're very similar. I think I've heard geo, I've heard industry. We look at segmentation, number of employees to determine company size. Technographic, also a pretty good one as we sort of move into some of our other products. But like, if I step back, the whole concept of an ICP is a theory. It is a theory that you make early days as you go along, and it's one that you should absolutely craft and operate under, because I'm a big believer in failing fast. Time is of the essence. You've got a limited sales team, they have limited resource. Point them in a direction that you think they're going to be most successful in, rather than like a large one.
Yep.
But then once you have that ICP, you should look to improve it or disprove it over time, and do that regularly. But none of that is possible without good data, because then you really can't really measure that. You can't really craft it. You can't really understand it. So it all really comes back to like, on ICP is a strategy. It is informed by insight, but is only built on good data.
Yeah, I love it. Naveen, one more follow-up question to that. How often do you iterate the ICP?
It should be quarterly, and it's not just like a go-to-market RevOps thing. It is something that should be done like as a council with marketing, with product marketing, so that there's a larger scope and better alignment. Because some of the things you're going to get out of this is you're going to feed your product roadmap, let alone where you're going to point your sales teams.
Yeah.
You're going to decide, what, government's not great for us because there are certain certifications we need. It doesn't make sense. Or operating in that industry, or sorry, operating in that region, maybe our product's not hosted there, might not be a great fit for us. We'll be opportunistic. It'll also do another thing, which is drive like lookalikes. So what I always think about it is like, once you've nailed your ICP and you have some customers, you're going to want to leverage that in your content. You're going to want to be able to show other companies that look like the company that you've landed as a customer the art of possible in your platform. I get outreached quite a bit, quite heavily. I get calls, I get emails, I get DMs. What a lot of these companies don't know is I go and look at their website. I may not reply to them. Look, I go and look. And what I try to do is look and understand my pain through the lens of what they offer. And the companies that do it well have those lookalikes on their website. They know, I know they're selling to RevOps personas. I can see the pain in what they are trying to solve. And I can see a light bulb click in that, hey, that kind of makes sense. I'm going to reach out, or I'm going to put it on my list. If you don't do those things, you're missing out.
Great points. Thanks, Naveen. Vivek, in your world, there are multiple ICPs, right? Because you guys have such a variety of products and services that you offer. How do you and your team manage ICPs?
I mean, it looks like everybody's doing good, but they are not, right? So in Honeywell, we have 30 businesses, and we sell multiple things to the same customer. If I had a very good customer profile, I could cross sell, I could serve the customer much better, I can increase the value of my customer. But in realistically speaking, you are so fragmented within a big organization, you lose that value, and that's where the ICP plays a bigger role. Is it account hierarchies? Is it what lines of business are you selling to the customer? If I had that all in a platter, I can do my crediting, the credit limit for a customer. I could solve that very easily. I could offer them a corporate rebate program, which can help the customer, but also help the company as well. So yes, there's a lot of opportunity in that space, where once we have a really good ICP across the organization, and then to your point, right? It's not just my data. I wanna ingest the data that the customer has in the public space as well.
Yeah.
We started a AI program where we started consuming a public company's data to understand where are they thinking about investing and what products can I offer in those sectors. That's my customer profile. That's what I want. Not only my data, but any publicly available data that can help me understand what the future, where are they going to set up a data center? Where are they going to do X, Y, and Z? And how do I go and pitch it to them from the very beginning while they are in the ideation stage? That's where the real value of ICP lies.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. Couldn't agree more with you. Having more access to the data to give you the 360-degree view of your customer. So we all talked about the importance of data. We talked about the ICP. Naveen touched upon every quarter you come back and look at the numbers and reiterate, right, refine your ICP. The age-old problem of silos still exist in 2025, sales, marketing, revenue operations, and that just gets the misalignment between the go-to-market teams itself. And as a result of that, that misalignment, you don't have full visibility into the funnel, right? The topic I want to unpack here is, where does this misalignment start between the go-to-market team members, and how do we fix it by defining the core APIs that we see throughout the journey, right? From once you define the ICP, from targeting them at the top of the funnel through marketing, BDRs, AEs, CS, AM, and then renewals, right? Daniel, would love for you to kick us off on that topic.
Yeah, and I think I typically get into growth stage companies where I'll say where I think you get there is not bringing in a revenue ops or non-biased operational data mindset early enough. I'm typically brought in where we do have silos of either data definition, or marketing is tracking to this metric and sales is tracking to that metric, and trying to align them to be thinking about the full funnel and how they're impacting each other throughout that funnel, is largely because you're moving so fast in that early growth stage where you're being asked by your board, you're being asked by the CEO to show how well you're doing. If you're spending money, you want to quickly show where that money is going and what it's returning. And you get a CMO that's running fast at their spend and ROI. You get a sales leader that's just trying to close at all costs. And then you try to come back and say, okay, well, we need to do some planning for next year, right? And we don't actually have the data points in a connected storyline to say, hey, actually marketing, your connected KPI to this revenue target is X, right? So you get this kind of T funnel where you get a whole bunch of campaign responses we might be tracking. Hopefully you're at least at that point. And then all of a sudden you drop in, okay, we booked these sales meetings, right? And you have this whole gap in your funnel where you're not quite sure. You have these 2,000 leads we might have pushed over to an SDR team, and now we have 200 meetings we're booking. What happened? Why is that conversion rate where it is? Did we have any do we have an MQL process? Do we have a ABM strategy maybe? Because we have such a tight ICP or target list we're going after. So starting to kind of take those questions and ask, always getting a marketing and a sales leader in the same conversation. Getting them to think about the impact of, hey, when we look at our funnel and we want to try to be more predictable with where our pipeline growth is coming from, or our win rates, why they're being impacted in a negative or positive way, it really does build back, and you need to reverse engineer that. Here's where we start to have gaps. CMO, what are you doing to help fill that gap here? What can we be doing differently? Sales leader, what can we be doing differently here? Getting everyone's perspective there, and then bringing that together. The RevOps really is the glue there, to say, hey, in a non-biased world, how am I getting everything you're trying to achieve, into what the company is trying to achieve? And what do we have to change as an organization, a go-to-market organization, to get there, right? I just kicked off a lifecycle marketing project. And, the big thing I put in the executive summary is this is not a marketing problem. It is not a marketing ops problem. This is a go-to-market challenge. We have gaps in our funnel. We need to take a step back. We need to add tracking across in our foundation, or else we can't jump ahead to think about a more complex attribution model. We can't jump ahead to say SDRs are winner or losing here because we're sending them everything. right? We need to get them, just like we need to be targeting at an ICP, which is still a pretty big bucket. And to Nevin's point, is a quality hypothesis, right? That you're going to be learning and need some feedback loops for. If you don't have those feedback loops in there and you're not segmenting down and scoring out what actually gets in SDR, you're making your SDR team less effective. They're spending a lot of time making calls and emails that are going nowhere. And yet you end up having this pipeline gap, right? So bringing those two teams together to show like the impact of not understanding your marketing campaign quality and what's actually sales ready to our revenue targets being missed or our pipeline coverage being missed, right? Those are all interconnected and everyone owns this data, and getting them to agree and literally down to, okay, what are our life cycle stages? What are the contact stages that go against that? And what are our sales process stages? Showing that in a combined workflow and ownership across, have sales and marketing align and say, yes, the name of the stage makes sense. The definition of that stage makes sense. And the exit criteria for that stage makes sense. And then you're all speaking the same language. And then once you get that foundation in place, you can come back and have a much more productive conversation about, hey, we're actually, our conversion rate from pre-sales to sales accepted opportunity is awesome, but our sales accepted opportunity to SS2 is really poor. What's going on here, right? Is it a quality issue? Is it a person issue? And you can actually start to have productive conversations. Whereas when you don't have that proper continuous data story, you're having assumptions, you're having anecdotal, you're having theories, and I feel like this is happening. And it typically ends up being a lot more of a time suck. You're going to have a lot less happy folks you're working with because everyone's kind of like fire drilling where this conversion metric went wrong versus being able to actually map it back, right? And having the continuous touch points. And not just that, but the cross-functional piece is having everyone understand those continual touch points.
Yeah, now I would add, Daniel, such a great point here. I would just add one more to that. Then you put the incentive plans for the same, because everybody understands what's the sales, qualified opportunity means.
Yes, exactly. That is it. Getting around the comp plan, which my theory is some of the reps actually might be doing that, and that's our issue with the conversion. But again, that's a theory, not a data-driven.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does go right. It impacts down to pay, and that also impacts the company's bottom line, right? So it all really is connected from, it's not just marketing, it's not just sales, it's not just finance.
Yeah, it
everyone
drives the
really
right
needs
behavior,
to.
like drives the
Yeah.
right behavior. Vivek, in your world, where you have multiple, revenue operations, folks across multiple departments, how do you bring this cross department alignment and define the core APIs or KPIs?
It's tricky, Manoj. I don't think anyone or even we have the best processes. We try to break the silos, very informally. So I talk to my peers in the other teams, and we do have access to all the systems, so we can look into each other's silos. But I think this is an opportunity where let's say a tool or an AI can actually proactively start talking about those things versus humans. As I'm focusing on my department and you are focusing on your department, and we are not really looking into each other so much, a tool or a system can bridge that gap. And I think that's a big opportunity where we have a need of a tool which can fill the gap where I cannot, as a person, really look into every silo and see how the customer looks, where the gap is, how do I break that siloed perspective. And we are all kind of carried by a lot of things every day that we really don't look into it, everyone else is. But I think that the tool or the system would really help.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Vivek. Reid, how do you provide that visibility across the?
Yeah, so I think one of the newer things we've been doing is we've had, every 2 weeks we run pipeline generation reviews. We call them PG meetings, right? And it's just a way, and we don't do them all 13 weeks of a quarter, because obviously as you get deeper in the quarter, the sales teams are really laser focused on finishing. But for those first month one and month two, every other week, really making sure, and we have clear targets set up for each one of our demand, areas. So sales is expected to generate a certain amount of pipeline every quarter. Marketing is expected to generate a certain amount of pipeline, and our channel teams, right? And each one of them have a dollar amount that they're expected to generate every quarter. And then, every 2 weeks, they're going through reviewing how pipeline generation's going. But it's not really about sort of, hey, you're doing something wrong or that kind of thing. It's really about, and this is what I keep telling my RevOps team, it is about finding what's working. I want you guys going deeper and deeper. Ask 5 questions, ask the 5 whys, right? Why did this campaign work? Well, we had a great event and people showed up. Well, like, why did they show up? What planning did, keep going deeper and deeper to really understand what made that campaign so successful. What made that, we onboarded some new channel partner and 10 new opportunities showed up. Well, what did we do? What was different? What type of geography, products are they selling? Who are their customers? How do we learn more about that? So really going deep on, I think, pipeline generation reviews is one way to bring those cross-functional teams together and having deeper conversations about what's working. And eventually, if you keep focused on that, the stuff that's not working, it's kind of like the weeds will get crowded out because we're really focused on the great stuff we're doing together. They'll do more of that as opposed to, hey, you screwed up and you messed this up and you didn't do this right. Now I don't have pipe. It's like, look, just let's stay positive and focus on what is working. And we'll get to the other side of this. And hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll have enough pipeline and the business will keep growing.
Bring them all towards one goal. So yours is pipeline generation, right? Naveen, as Daniel said, she's the glue, right? RevOps is the glue for the sales and marketing, the rest of the go-to-market organization. How do you bring the cross-functional alignment in your organization?
We're not only the glue in terms of ensuring that the data is where it needs to be able to report on it. We're Switzerland. We are trying to be neutral party, right? Removing emotion, presenting fact, and trying to understand the plan forward. And I've seen this at every company I've been, and less so now. Once you get to a point where you have data maturity, it's then everyone's cutting the data differently because data can be used to shape any narrative. And this is where I think a lot of that friction sort of manifests and permeates. And this is where the opportunity for a strong RevOps leadership to grab that by the reins and say here's what's actually happening. Here's the narrative. Here's the problems. And then, push it back to the business to decide, do you want to fix this or do you want to let it fester? Right. And this is where, the RevOps function, once you've built data, you can then use it to empower yourselves, right? It's that insight that you're going to pull out. RevOps team isn't making strategy, but we are helping informing on it and helping telling you whether it's working or not and helping making sure we collect the data to do those things. And I think that's where it's really, really important. This is where all of your work in making sure that you have strong data can then be leveraged back into the business. This is that point of intersection where if you're doing that wrong, then forget about trying to do this right.
Yeah. We say data tells a story, right? But you want the right data so that you can get the right story, right? The right insights around it. And data tells a story.
You can tell any story you want with the data. That's what I always try to tell my team is, yes, there's dirty data and you want to get to the cleanest data possible. But the next step, once you get to feeling good about your data confidence, is you can really tell whatever story you want to put together, depending on what cuts and filters and whatnot you put into that data. So.
Yeah, and those stories are very helpful from budgeting purposes, from defining your strategy, go-to-market strategy, and the valuations and exits, right? I would love to have Vivek share his insights on how dirty data impacts valuations.
Right. So I'll share a first-hand information, first-hand experience, Manoj. The last 12, 14 months, we are actually going through a divestiture and the transaction should close anytime now. So we are separating out from Honeywell. And, when we went through the due diligence process, we started with, several buyers and we kind of zeroed down into one buyer who's valuing us at a certain dollar value. But during that process and during the due diligence, as we are going through and the buyers are asking different questions, to look at our pipeline, to look at our revenue, historicals. So they're looking at last 5 to 7 years. And that includes the COVID era, right? Which kind of every company saw spikes and downs. So it's a bit of abnormality in the data. And it's all the more important your data sets are right, because the company or the buyer is trying to value your company based on your past performance, your future potential. One of the challenges we faced as we were putting together the 5-7 years worth of just simple revenue data, there was an ERP transition in 2021, and we lost a big portion of the data, which was, gapped out. What happened is the product, and to read, right, the CPQ, the product configurations mismatch, and the revenue started showing up in the wrong product line. And as you see the COVID era, now you're talking about abnormality in the COVID era, plus the gap in the product mapping. Now your lines of businesses are completely everywhere. So really, we had to, it came down to a point where the buyer said, unless we get this and we see this clean data and fixed data, the deal will fall apart, and we won't be going with this process. We literally spent a week just to patch the data. And what that talks about is I'm losing trust in the buyers with my dirty data. That's the first problem you face when you're going through any acquisition, any divestiture, any M&A. You lose the trust. The second thing with the dirty data that you always face is operational inefficiency, right? What I just explained, I lost a week just to patch data, not just by myself, all the product managers, all the salespeople who have been there for 7 years, who are providing insights on how to patch the data. We lost inefficiency for all those people for 1 week, right? When you lose efficiency, what happens is the cost starts going up, and then it costs your valuation as well, right? The third thing, simple compliance. Think about GPDR, think about, there's a lot of compliance metrics. The dirty data starts creating compliance issues and screams risk at the buyer that, hey, I'm buying something which may have a compliance issue, and I'm buying the risk, right? Which will impact the valuation of the company that you're buying. And the last but not least, right, lower valuations will lead to the dirty data will lead to lower valuations, but also terms and legal clauses that are going to go with the buy process. What we really, I think we need to do is 4 things. Certainly set up the guardrails, set up the governance process, train your teams, lean on technology, use tools that can help put those guardrails together. The moment I try to create an account, a tool should tell me there are 4 customers that exist with this name. Choose one of the 4. If you're absolutely sure it's not one of the 4, then create a new account. And the last is not least, to Navin's point, quarterly audit the data, and that will help a lot of issues getting solved.
Yeah, it's such a great way to end. I know we have 2 minutes here. Would see if there are questions that we can take here. Or what, given the 1 minute left here, how about we compile these questions and responses and send it out to all attendees by email? I want to make sure that we put the right amount of thoughts in answering these questions that have come up. But thank you so much, everyone, for dialing in, and thank you so much to our amazing panelists on this very important and timely topics. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to chatting you more about the data, quality of data, and how to keep things clean.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great being here.